For 7 long years, Margaret believed she was doing the right thing. She had 2 daughters. Emily was the pride of the family. She graduated from a respected university, earned awards, and seemed destined for success. Friends, relatives, and neighbors praised her achievements constantly. Her younger daughter, Sarah, was different. Sarah struggled in school. She never received top grades. She wasn't interested in academic competitions. While Emily spent evenings studying, Sarah spent her time helping neighbors, volunteering at community events, and taking care of elderly people in the neighborhood. Margaret rarely noticed those efforts. Whenever relatives visited, she proudly displayed Emily's certificates on the living room wall. She talked about Emily's future career, her ambitions, and her accomplishments. Sarah sat quietly in the corner, smiling politely. At first she didn't mind. But as the years passed, the difference became impossible to ignore. Every birthday felt different. Every family gathering felt different. Every conversation seemed to end with praise for Emily and silence for Sarah. Sarah never complained. She preferred her educated daughter every single day for 7 years. What happened next changed everything. For as long as anyone could remember, Margaret believed that success had a very specific look. To her, success meant good grades, prestigious schools, awards, certificates, and a career that impressed people. She spent years teaching her daughters that education was the most important thing in life. She had 2 daughters. The older one, Emily, seemed to fit perfectly into Margaret's vision of success. From a young age, Emily excelled in school. She brought home perfect grades, won competitions, and earned praise from teachers everywhere she went. The younger daughter, Sarah, was completely different. Sarah struggled to keep up in class. She wasn't interested in academic awards. She never stood on stage holding trophies. Instead, she spent her time helping people. She helped elderly neighbors carry groceries. She volunteered at community centers. She spent weekends assisting families who needed support. Yet none of these things impressed Margaret. Every evening at dinner, conversations revolved around Emily's achievements. Every family gathering became another opportunity to celebrate Emily's success. And little by little, Sarah became invisible inside her own home. At first, Sarah tried harder. She studied longer. She pushed herself to achieve better grades. But no matter what she did, she could never reach the standards her mother had created. Eventually, she stopped trying to compete. Instead, she focused on becoming the person she wanted to be: kind, patient, helpful, compassionate. Unfortunately, those qualities were not the things Margaret valued most. Years passed. 1 year became 2. 2 became 3. Then 4. Then 5. Then 6. Then 7. For 7 long years, Margaret continued favoring Emily. She never intended to hurt Sarah. She simply believed she was encouraging excellence. What she didn't realize was that every comparison created another invisible wound. Every compliment given to one daughter became a silent reminder to the other that she was never enough. And while Margaret was busy celebrating one daughter's accomplishments, she completely missed the extraordinary life the other daughter was quietly building. Sarah never complained. She never argued. She never demanded recognition. She simply continued helping people. And those people never forgot her. One day, everything began to change. The daughter nobody noticed. The years continued moving forward. To everyone outside the family, Margaret appeared to be a proud and successful mother. Whenever someone asked about her daughters, she immediately began talking about Emily. Emily's university achievements. Emily's awards. Emily's future plans. Emily's bright future. Most people never even heard Sarah's name. Sarah noticed it. Of course she did. But she learned something very early in life. Some battles are impossible to win. The harder she tried to earn her mother's approval, the more exhausted she became. So eventually she stopped chasing it. Instead, she focused on something else: helping others. At first, nobody paid attention. A few hours here, a few hours there. Small acts of kindness. Nothing extraordinary. Or at least that's what everyone believed. Every Saturday morning, Sarah volunteered at a local community center. She organized food donations. She delivered supplies to struggling families. She helped elderly residents fill out paperwork. She listened to lonely people who simply needed someone to talk to. Many people overlooked these actions, but the people she helped never forgot them. One winter afternoon, Sarah met an elderly man named Robert. Robert had recently lost his wife. After 50 years of marriage, he suddenly found himself completely alone. His children lived far away. His friends had become distant. Most days he sat inside his small house without speaking to anyone. Sarah visited him once, then twice, then every week. She brought groceries. She listened to his stories. She helped him with errands. Most importantly, she treated him like he mattered. Months later, Robert told her something she would never forget. "You remind me that kindness still exists." Those simple words stayed with Sarah for years, because unlike awards and certificates, gratitude felt real. Meanwhile, Emily's life appeared perfect. She graduated with honors. She received job offers from respected companies. Relatives constantly praised her achievements. Margaret couldn't have been prouder. Every family gathering became another celebration. Emily is amazing. Emily has such a bright future. Emily will be very successful. The compliments never stopped. Sarah simply smiled. Nobody noticed how quiet she had become. Nobody noticed how often she sat alone. Nobody noticed that she rarely spoke about her own dreams. Then something unexpected happened. One evening, Sarah received a phone call. It came from the community center. The director had an opportunity for her. A local nonprofit organization needed help coordinating volunteer programs. The position wasn't glamorous. The salary wasn't impressive. Most people wouldn't consider it a major success. But Sarah accepted immediately. For the first time in her life, she felt excited about the future. The job allowed her to do what she loved most: helping people. Over the next 2 years, Sarah transformed the program completely. Volunteer numbers increased. Community support expanded. Donations grew. Families received assistance faster than ever before. Slowly, her reputation began spreading throughout the city. People started talking about her work. Local leaders noticed her efforts. Organizations invited her to meetings. Businesses began partnering with her projects. But none of this reached Margaret's attention. Or if it did, she didn't consider it important. In her eyes, Emily was still the success story. And Sarah was simply Sarah. Then came a moment that would change everything. One afternoon, Emily lost her job. The company she worked for announced major restructuring. Hundreds of employees were affected. Emily was one of them. At first, she remained confident. She had excellent qualifications, a strong resume, outstanding references. Finding another position shouldn't be difficult. Or so she believed. Weeks passed. Then months. Applications turned into rejections. Interviews led nowhere. The confidence that once defined Emily slowly began disappearing. For the first time in her life, achievement alone wasn't enough. And for the first time, Margaret saw fear in her daughter's eyes. But this was only the beginning. Because while Emily's world was beginning to crack, Sarah's world was quietly preparing for a breakthrough that nobody saw coming. A breakthrough that would force Margaret to question everything she had believed for 7 long years. And when that moment finally arrived, nothing in the family would ever be the same again. The turning point nobody expected. For most of her life, Emily had been the person everyone admired. She was the daughter teachers praised, the student relatives talked about, the young woman neighbors pointed to as an example. Success had always followed her. Or at least that's what it seemed. But now, for the first time, life wasn't going according to plan. Weeks turned into months. The job offers never came. The interviews became more difficult. Every rejection felt heavier than the one before. At first, Emily tried hiding her frustration. She smiled during family dinners. She told everyone she was doing fine. She insisted that another opportunity was just around the corner. But inside, she was struggling. The confidence that had taken years to build was slowly disappearing. One evening, after receiving another rejection email, Emily sat alone in her room. She stared at the screen. Another company. Another interview. Another disappointment. For the first time, she began questioning herself. Who was she without her achievements? Who was she without awards? Who was she without success? The questions terrified her. Meanwhile, Sarah's life was moving in a completely different direction. The volunteer program she managed had become one of the fastest-growing community initiatives in the region. Families trusted her. Volunteers respected her. Community leaders admired her dedication. Yet Sarah remained the same person she had always been. Kind, humble, quiet. She never chased recognition. She simply focused on helping people. One afternoon, a local newspaper published a story about her work. The article highlighted dozens of families whose lives had improved because of the programs she helped create. Single parents received support. Homeless veterans found assistance. Elderly residents gained access to resources they desperately needed. The article spread quickly. Within days, people across the city were sharing it online. Thousands of readers praised her efforts. But Sarah never mentioned it at home. Not because she wanted to hide it. Because she didn't think it mattered. Years of being overlooked had taught her not to expect attention. Several days later, Margaret accidentally came across the article. At first, she barely recognized the name. Then she looked closer. The woman being praised by hundreds of people was her own daughter, Sarah. Margaret read every word. Then she read it again. For a moment, she felt something unfamiliar. Confusion. How had she missed all of this? How had she never realized the impact Sarah was making? The article described Sarah as a leader, a problem solver, a source of hope for struggling families. People spoke about her with deep respect. Some even called her an inspiration. Margaret couldn't remember the last time she had heard anyone describe Sarah that way. That evening, she wanted to ask questions. But old habits are difficult to break. When dinner started, the conversation once again shifted toward Emily's career search. Sarah remained quiet, just as she always had. The moment passed. But something inside Margaret had begun to change. For the first time in 7 years, she started paying attention. A few weeks later, another unexpected event occurred. Sarah received an invitation to speak at a regional community leadership conference. Hundreds of nonprofit leaders would attend. Business executives would be there. Local officials would be present. It was a significant opportunity. When Sarah received the email, she was shocked. She almost declined. Public speaking made her nervous. She preferred working behind the scenes. But her colleagues encouraged her. They reminded her that the people she helped deserved a voice. Eventually, she agreed. The conference arrived. Sarah stood in front of a large audience. Her hands trembled slightly. Her heart raced. Then she began speaking. She didn't talk about herself. She talked about the family she had met. The elderly people who felt forgotten. The veterans struggling to rebuild their lives. The single mothers working multiple jobs to support their children. She spoke from the heart. Every word was genuine. Every story was real. By the end of her speech, the room was completely silent. Then someone started clapping. Another person joined. Then another. Within seconds, the entire audience stood on its feet. The applause lasted for several minutes. Many people were wiping away tears. Some later described it as the most powerful speech of the event. Sarah couldn't believe it. She had never imagined that her voice could have such an impact. What she didn't know was that someone had recorded the speech. Within days, clips began appearing online. Thousands of people watched. Then tens of thousands. Then hundreds of thousands. Messages poured in from across the country. People thanked her for sharing hope. They thanked her for reminding them that kindness still mattered. And suddenly, the daughter nobody noticed was becoming someone impossible to ignore. Back at home, Margaret watched everything unfold. Each new article, each new interview, each new story. With every passing day, she realized a painful truth. For 7 years, she had measured success using the wrong scale. She had spent years celebrating accomplishments she could see, while completely overlooking qualities that were far more valuable. But an even greater shock was approaching, a moment that would force the entire family to confront. The day everything changed. Margaret had spent years believing she understood what success looked like. Good grades, prestigious schools, impressive careers. awards, recognition, status. For most of her life, she never questioned those beliefs. Why would she? They seemed logical. They seemed reasonable. They seemed correct. But now, every day brought evidence that challenged everything she thought she knew. Sarah's influence continued growing. People from different cities contacted her organization. Community leaders requested her advice. New volunteers joined every week. Families spoke about her with gratitude. Yet Sarah remained exactly the same. She still spent her mornings helping others. She still answered calls from people in need. She still treated everyone with kindness. No matter how much attention she received, she never acted differently. Margaret noticed that. And the more she noticed, the more uncomfortable she became. Because deep inside, she was beginning to realize something painful. She had spent 7 years looking at one daughter, while barely seeing the other. One evening, she sat alone in the living room. Family photographs covered the walls. Pictures from birthdays, graduations, holiday celebrations, memories from years gone by. As she studied those photographs, something caught her attention. In almost every picture, Emily stood proudly in the center. Sarah was often standing quietly at the side, smiling, watching, present, but somehow forgotten. For a long moment, Margaret couldn't look away. The photographs seemed to tell a story she had never noticed before. A story of attention. A story of favoritism. A story of invisible pain. For the first time, tears filled her eyes. Not because someone had hurt her, because she realized she might have hurt someone else. The next morning, life delivered another surprise. Margaret received an unexpected phone call. The caller introduced himself as the director of a national nonprofit organization. At first, Margaret assumed he had the wrong number. Then he mentioned Sarah. The director explained that Sarah had been selected for a prestigious national recognition award. Thousands of candidates had been considered. Only a handful were chosen. Sarah was one of them. Margaret sat silently as he spoke. Her hands began shaking. The director described Sarah as a leader who had transformed countless lives. A woman whose compassion inspired entire communities. Someone who represented the very best qualities of service and leadership. When the call ended, Margaret remained frozen in her chair. The room felt unusually quiet. She kept hearing the same words over and over. Leadership, compassion, inspiration, service. All those years she had been searching for success. And somehow, success had been sitting at her own dinner table. She simply failed to recognize it. That evening, Sarah arrived home after a long day. As usual, she expected a normal evening. Nothing special. Nothing different. But Margaret surprised her. For the first time in years, she asked about Sarah's day. Not casually. Not out of politeness. Genuinely. Sarah looked confused. Then she answered. They talked for nearly an hour. Margaret listened carefully. She learned about families Sarah had helped, programs she had built, challenges she had overcome, dreams she still hoped to achieve. Every minute revealed something new. Every story exposed another piece of the daughter she barely knew. When the conversation ended, Sarah smiled. A simple smile. Yet it felt different. Warmer. More hopeful. As though a door had finally opened. But the biggest moment was still waiting. A few weeks later, the national award ceremony arrived. Leaders from across the country gathered for the event. Business executives, community organizers, government officials, media representatives. The room was filled with accomplished people. Margaret and Emily sat together among the audience. Neither knew exactly what to expect. Then Sarah's name was announced. The audience erupted into applause. A massive screen displayed images of community projects she had created, families she had helped, lives she had changed, stories of hope she had inspired. One by one, people described the impact she had made. Some spoke through tears. Others struggled to find words. The gratitude was overwhelming. Margaret felt her chest tighten. Emily sat silently beside her. Neither could believe what they were hearing. Then Sarah stepped onto the stage. The applause grew even louder. For nearly 30 seconds, the crowd remained standing. Hundreds of people. On their feet. celebrating someone who had spent years feeling invisible at home. At that moment, Margaret could no longer hold back her emotions. Tears streamed down her face. Not because Sarah had won an award, because she finally understood what she had missed. The greatest achievement wasn't academic success. It wasn't status. It wasn't prestige. It wasn't recognition. The greatest achievement was changing lives. And Sarah had done exactly that. When the ceremony ended, people rushed forward to congratulate her. Many wanted photographs. Others wanted advice. Some simply wanted to thank her. Yet Sarah remained humble. She greeted everyone kindly. She thanked them for their support. She gave credit to her team. Watching from a distance, Margaret realized something that would stay with her forever. Character had accomplished what recognition never could. Kindness had created an impact that success alone could never achieve. But one final conversation still needed to happen. A conversation 7 years in the making. A conversation that would either heal old wounds or reveal scars that never truly disappeared. And that conversation was now unavoidable. 7 years of silence. The drive home from the award ceremony felt different. Nobody spoke much. The usual conversations never happened. No one discussed work. No one talked about future plans. No one mentioned the award. Instead, an unusual silence filled the car. But this silence was not uncomfortable. It was heavy. Heavy with memories. Heavy with regrets. Heavy with things that should have been said years ago. Margaret sat staring out the window. For 7 years, she had believed she was helping her family. She thought she was motivating her daughters, encouraging excellence, preparing them for success. Now she wasn't so sure. For the first time, she questioned every decision she had made, every comparison, every overlooked achievement, every moment Sarah needed support and never received it. The memories kept returning. Birthdays, family dinners, school events, holiday celebrations, moments she could never get back, moments she wished she could relive. When they arrived home, Sarah headed toward her room. She was exhausted from the long day. But before she could leave, Margaret quietly called her name. Sarah. Sarah stopped. She turned around. Something in her mother's voice felt different. Softer. More vulnerable. Margaret took a deep breath. For several seconds, she struggled to find words. Then finally she spoke. I owe you an apology. The room became completely silent. Sarah stared at her mother. She wasn't expecting those words. Not tonight. Not ever. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I should have said this years ago. Her voice trembled. I was wrong. Sarah remained silent. Not because she was angry, because she was shocked. Margaret continued. For years I measured success the wrong way. I thought achievements were everything. I thought awards were everything. I thought grades were everything. I spent so much time celebrating accomplishments that I failed to see the incredible person standing right in front of me. The invisible sadness she carried for so long. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Margaret said something she had never said before. I'm proud of you. Sarah felt her heart stop. Those 4 words. For simple words. Words she had waited years to hear. Words she had almost given up on. Margaret stepped closer. I'm proud of your kindness. I'm proud of your strength. I'm proud of the lives you've changed. I'm proud of the woman you've become. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Not because the pain disappeared. Because someone had finally acknowledged it. For years she never needed applause. She never needed awards. She never needed public recognition. She simply wanted to feel seen. And for the first time in 7 years, she did. The two embraced. Years of silence. Years of misunderstanding. Years of emotional distance. All released in a single moment. Nearby, Emily watched quietly. She too had tears in her eyes. Because the truth was difficult for her as well. For years, she had benefited from the attention. She had received the praise, the admiration, the recognition. But she never truly understood the cost. Now she did. Later that evening, Emily knocked on Sarah's bedroom door. Sarah invited her inside. For several seconds, neither knew what to say. Then Emily spoke. I think I owe you an apology too. Sarah looked surprised. Emily sat beside her. There were times I noticed the difference. There were times I saw what was happening. And I didn't say anything. Her voice cracked. I should have. Sarah listened quietly. Emily continued. I spent years trying to be perfect. Trying to meet expectations. Trying to earn approval. I thought success would solve everything. But lately I've realized something. Sarah waited. Emily smiled sadly. I was chasing achievements. You were changing lives. The room fell silent. Then both sisters laughed softly through their tears. For the first time in years, there was no competition. No comparison. No expectations. Just two sisters finally understanding each other. Over the following months, the family slowly changed. Conversations became different. Healthier. More balanced. Everyone listened more. Everyone appreciated each other's strengths. Margaret worked hard to rebuild trust. She knew apologies alone weren't enough. Real change required action. And day by day, she proved she was serious. The wounds didn't disappear overnight. Some pain takes time to heal. But healing had finally begun. What nobody realized was that the greatest chapter of Sarah's story had not happened yet. Because the recognition she received at the national ceremony was about to open doors she never imagined possible. Doors that would allow her to impact thousands more lives. And what happened next would surprise the entire country. The daughter who spent years feeling invisible was about to become a symbol of hope for people everywhere. And her biggest challenge was still ahead. The daughter who changed everything. In the months following the national award ceremony, Sarah's life changed in ways she never expected. Phone calls arrived from organizations across the country. Community leaders invited her to share her ideas. Universities requested interviews. Nonprofit groups asked for guidance. Media outlets wanted to tell her story. Yet despite all the attention, Sarah remained the same person she had always been. She still woke up early. She still answered messages from families in need. She still spent hours helping people solve problems that many others ignored. Success had entered her life, but it had not changed her heart. And perhaps that was the reason people trusted her. The more they learned about her story, the more inspired they became. Many people saw themselves in Sarah. People who had been overlooked. People who felt invisible. People who believed their efforts didn't matter. Sarah became proof that kindness could create extraordinary change. 1 year later, she launched a nationwide initiative designed to connect volunteers with struggling communities. The idea was simple. If people wanted to help, Sarah wanted to make it easier. The response exceeded every expectation. Thousands joined. Then tens of thousands. Soon, communities in multiple states were benefiting from programs inspired by Sarah's vision. Families received support. Elderly residents gained assistance. Students found mentors. Veterans received resources. Lives improved. One person at a time. One family at a time. One community at a time. As the movement grew, reporters often asked Sarah the same question. What motivated you to dedicate your life to helping others? Her answer never changed. She would smile and say, everyone deserves to feel seen. Those words resonated with millions. Because deep down, nearly everyone understands what it feels like to be overlooked. To be underestimated. To be forgotten. Sarah understood that feeling better than most. Sarah looked at her mother carefully. Then she smiled. You didn't miss them. Margaret seemed confused. Sarah continued. You made mistakes. We all do. But you're here now. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Sarah gently took her hand. We can't change the past. But we can decide what happens next. For the first time in years, Margaret felt peace. Not because the past disappeared. Because she finally accepted that growth was possible. Change was possible. Healing was possible. And from that moment forward, she made a promise. She would never compare people again. Not her daughters. Not anyone. She would celebrate each person's unique strengths. The lesson had taken 7 years to learn. But it transformed her life forever. Emily experienced her own transformation as well. After months of self-reflection, She realized she had spent too much of her life chasing validation, always seeking approval, always trying to prove herself, always connecting her worth to achievements. Watching Sarah taught her something different. True value wasn't measured by titles. It wasn't measured by awards. It wasn't measured by status. It was measured by impact, by character, by the way a person treats others. Slowly, Emily rebuilt her confidence. She eventually found a career she genuinely enjoyed. Not because it impressed people, because it gave her purpose. And for the first time, she felt fulfilled. Years later, the family gathered for another celebration. This time, the atmosphere felt completely different. There were no comparisons. No favoritism. No invisible competitions. Only love. Only respect. Only gratitude. At one point during the evening, someone asked Margaret a simple question. Which daughter are you most proud of? The room became quiet. Everyone waited for her answer. Margaret smiled. Then she looked at both daughters. And she replied, I'm proud of them for completely different reasons. The room filled with warm laughter. But Sarah knew those words carried deep meaning. Years ago, such an answer would have been impossible. Now it represented growth, wisdom, and healing. As the evening continued, Margaret watched her daughters talking together, laughing together, supporting each other. And she realized something that brought tears to her eyes. Success had never been the problem. Her definition of success had been the problem. For years, she believed success belonged to the daughter with the most achievements. In reality, success belonged to both daughters. Just in different ways. One had achieved excellence. The other had transformed lives. Both mattered. Both deserved recognition. Both deserved love. And perhaps that was the most important lesson of all. Because every person has gifts. Every person has value. Every person matters. Sometimes those gifts appear in report cards. Sometimes they appear in acts of kindness. Sometimes they appear in ways the world cannot immediately see. But that doesn't make them any less important. The story of Sarah reminds us that the people who seem ordinary today may be quietly creating extraordinary change. The people who receive the least attention may possess the greatest strength. And the person standing silently in the corner may one day inspire the world. If there is one lesson to remember from this story, it is this. Never underestimate a kind heart. Never overlook someone because their path looks different. And never assume that success has only one face. Because sometimes, the person nobody notices becomes the person nobody can ever forget.